I am Jillian Soder, and I am on a mission to help build confident yoga teachers through anatomical insights. I am the owner of Body Labs Yoga and Education, and I am really excited that you're here today. We're going to talk about the hips today and understanding a little bit more about the anatomy of them. So I have this medical model of a pelvis and the upper thigh bones, all right? Part of the upper thigh bones, I should say. So let me just take a moment to orientate you here. So I'm holding this as though it's in my body, all right? So if I were to turn sideways, this is the side, all right? This is the front. Turn it around, this is the back, all right? Now, there's a couple of structures that I'm going to point out here just for your own knowledge. So if you take a look at this big bone here, all right, it kind of sweeps around to the front. It almost looks like a big elephant ear, all right? There's one on either side of the pelvis. And when you place your hands on your hips, you're placing your hands right here, all right? So it's interesting when we talk about the hips, all right? If I were to ask you to take one finger and point to your hip, what area would you point to? So just take a moment and acknowledge what the word hip means to you. Does that mean down here, more towards where the joint is? Or does it mean up here where you place your hands on the hips, all right? It's just kind of an interesting thing for us to be aware of. Because if you were to say to your students something about the hips, from person to person, that may mean different things, all right? Now, if we look at this bone, all right, this big swooping bone here, this is actually 3 different bones that have fused together, all right? So it's actually in an adult, it's called the innominate bone, all right? You have one on either side. In children or babies, it's actually made up of 3, all right? And so we have the ilium, this big one here. We have the ischium right here, which is our sit bones. When we sit down, our ischiums, okay? And then the front here, just this kind of bridge right here, that's the pubis, all right? So the pubic bone. And they come together and there is a joint right at the front here, that's pubic symphysis. And then on the back, we have this big bone that's almost shaped like the butterfly, all right? And that is the sacrum, okay? Stacked on top of the sacrum is the vertebrae of the lower back. And then right here, this is actually not a part of the pelvis. This is the upper leg bone, all right? So this is the femur. Now it's been cut in half-ish, or the top quarter of it is cut off, all right, just for simplicity. But this is actually part of the leg, and it's going to come into this ball and socket joint. And this is the area that we're really talking about when we talk about the hips in yoga, all right? So when we're talking about movement science and what is happening in the hips, we're actually talking about this joint right here, which is a ball and socket joint made up of the head of the femur, all right? And the socket, which is actually called the acetabulum. Don't worry about it, all right? But just understand that when we are cueing something from the hips, it's this joint right here. However, your students might hear the hip, or they might hear the hip, all right? Because if you think about like a hip check, all right? I always say that it's that bony part where your car door doesn't get completely closed, but yet it's locked, right? And so you have to kind of give it that little extra kick out with your hip. That is happening right here, all right? And that actually has nothing to do with the joint itself. It's where the muscles that support the joint attach, absolutely, but it has nothing to do with the joint itself. So keep in mind these little cueing concepts when we're talking to a room full of 5, 10, 15, 20 students or more. If you have more than one person in the room with you, there are going to be different interpretations of the word hip, okay? So keep that in mind as an instructor.